Welcome to the Ketovangelist Kitchen. I'm Brian.
And I'm Carrie.
And this podcast is dedicated to making things simple and easy for you in the kitchen. Carrie Brown is a classically trained, world-class chef who has a passion for creating ketogenic recipes that taste better than anything you've ever experienced. But more than that, she loves teaching people how to cook the right way.
And each week on this podcast, Brian and I discuss all the ways you can create awesome keto food that is guaranteed to make you a rock star in the kitchen.
If you'd like to learn more about Ketovangelist Kitchen, you can go to KetoVangelistKitchen.com and sign up for the newsletter.
In exchange for your email address, you'll get brand new recipes delivered to your inbox, ready for you to whip up in the kitchen and enjoy with your friends and family.
So sit back, relax, and get ready to laugh and learn. You're about to enter the Ketovangelist Kitchen. Carrie.
Do you know how hard it is for me not to call you your nickname?
Call me what?
Well, you don't want me to say it, so I'm trying not to.
Oh.
You didn't like my nickname for you.
No, I really didn't. Hello, everyone. This is the Ketovangelist Kitchen. I'm Brian. She's Carrie. Say hi, Carrie.
Hello.
And what are we talking about today?
We are talking about proteins, fats, and carbs, and what are good sources of two of the above.
We're not going to tell you which two, but two of them. All right. So one of the questions that we get
if you need help knowing what the two are, then you may want to go back to number one and listen to the podcasts again.
Right. Yes, clearly. So we get questions constantly about whether or not certain kinds of foods fall into these categories. So the term that people use is macros, right? Macro is short for macronutrient, and there are 4 macronutrients in the whole entire nutritional world. Those 4 macronutrients are, and I quote, carbohydrates, a protein, a fat, and alcohol. Now, we're not talking about alcohol because that isn't part of a regular diet for most people. So that's not one of them. Now, it is a macro, but it's not one of the ones that we're concerning ourselves with. So that leaves carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So those are the 3 macros. When someone's talking about macros, that's what they're talking about. But people ask us, how do I know if something is a protein? Or how do I know if something is a fat? Or how do I know if something is a carbohydrate? And typically, Carrie will respond with something along the lines of, you're dumb, leave me alone. But I, being as nice as I am, will typically try to walk someone through that process. Am I right or am I wrong?
You're completely wrong. You're talking utter nonsense.
Rubbish. It's rubbish. Okay, so...
For example, in the real world, in the pre-keto world, hands up everyone who thinks milk's a good source of protein.
I'm raising my hand right now.
Right. Milk's not a protein, it's a carb.
Right.
Everybody's confused about that. Everybody is confused about that. Milk is not a good source of protein at all, and in fact, milk's a carbohydrate.
Right. Now, let's be honest. The reason that people think that is because of the milk commercials, the got milk stuff. They tout it as 9 grams protein in 1 whole glass of milk. But that's just a bunch of crap because there's like 7,000 grams of carbs in a glass of milk. I could be making that part up, but there's a lot more carbs in a glass of milk is my point, right?
And that's why we're doing this episode because people have become misinformed or misguided or just don't understand or just don't know what food category a lot of foods fall into. Right.
Okay. So milk is one example of what we're talking about. There are others that are kind of confusing. So let's be honest. So some of the things that we're talking about, different people will categorize in different ways. For example, I have heard people, let's talk about bacon, because bacon is one of those magical foods that kind of dances along a line, right? So some people are like, no, it's a protein source. No, it's a fat source. No, it's a protein source. No, it's a fat source. And because of the makeup of of bacon, it's difficult to say for sure. And the reason is it's equal parts, right? So a typical slice of bacon will have roughly 3 grams of protein and 3 grams of fat, right? Same thing with an egg. Egg has roughly, a typical egg will have we'll call it I forget I only buy jumbo eggs, right? But a regular egg is going to have something along the lines of 5 or 6 grams of fat and like 6 or 7 grams of protein. So it's kind of like on that line. So if it's something like that, you can qualify it as either way. Just keep in mind that it does have both, right? It's got an equal part both. So there are certain things that may be hard to classify and that certain people will classify a specific way. But for the most part, most foods are not going to fall into that category, right?
I would like to offer up an easy formula for determining what a food is.
I am getting a piece of paper and a pen. Go.
I'm trying to think how the best way to put this is. The macronutrient that provides the largest number of calories.
Oh dear.
So for example, I'm looking at, if 50% or more of the calories in a thing come from fat, then it's fat.
Okay.
Protein, then it's protein. Carb, then it's carb. So for example, the bacon, and I'm actually looking, while you were jabbering on there, I went to my fridge and got out my lovely packet of Trader Joe's uncured apple smoked bacon.
I was not jabbering. Thank you very much.
You're doing a very fine job. And because it has 7 grams of fat and 5 grams of protein and 0 carbs, because fat has 9 calories and protein has 4, the largest percentage of the calories in a piece of bacon come from fat. Therefore, we would say it was a good source of fat.
Right.
It does have protein, but the best source for bacon is fat.
All right. So the best macro category, right, would be fat. So that's a simple and easy way to do things, right? So if you're looking at the makeup and it's equal, remember that if it's equal, it's essentially going to be a fat, right? If the grams of protein and the grams of fat are the same per serving, it's going to be considered a fat, right? It's going to be
good source of fat.
Good source of fat, right? So that's the idea. So that's a simple and easy way to do it. Now, not everyone uses that categorization. Go listen to their podcast because you're listening to ours, and that's what we're doing. But seriously, don't listen to theirs because we're better, right? Am I wrong? No?
No. You're absolutely right.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay. Okay.
That's an easy way to do it. So then if we go back to the milk thing, and I don't have milk in my fridge to pull out the numbers, but if you look at milk and you use that formula, then it becomes very obvious that milk is not a protein. It's not a good source of protein. It has protein in it, but it's not a good source. It is, in fact, a carbohydrate because the majority of calories in milk come from carbohydrate.
Right. So using that same kind of formula, a carbohydrate and a protein have the same number of calories per gram. They're 4 calories per gram. Typical. Now let's talk whole milk because whole milk has the most fat in it, right?
Yep.
And even then, it's considered a carbohydrate because it's got 12 grams of carbs, and 8 grams of protein. So the commercials are not wrong. They do have 8 or 9 grams of protein per glass of milk, but there's 12 grams of carbs in it. 12, 13, sometimes 14, 15 grams of carbs, which is the sugar, the natural sugar that takes place. So we're talking.
And
go ahead.
There are much better sources of protein. I think that's the. Yes, you can get protein from milk, but you can get far better protein from a smaller amount of something else. So, why drink gallons of milk just to get the same amount of protein, especially when you're also consuming all those carbs along with it? I think so. Did that make sense?
Yes. So again, you have to, again, this goes back to looking at labels and knowing what you're dealing with, right? And realizing the categorizations for them. So aside from the quote unquote difficult ones, or the ones that are can be categorized in different ways. Generally any vegetable is going to be considered a carb. There's one major exception to that. And that is the wonderful avocado, right? Because an avocado has a very high amount of fat. So, and we can talk about avocados in just a second, but if it's a vegetable, generally speaking, it's going to be considered a carbohydrate, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's talk.
Although some vegetables have proteins in and
right,
but that doesn't mean they're a good source, and you wouldn't want to eat 5 pounds of leeks just to get 5 grams of protein, because that would be dumb.
I would not want to eat 5 pounds of leeks. Period. Let me just put that out there.
Convert, Brian. I'm just letting you know, you will be converted to leeks at some point.
Did I already say this? I'm not sure if I said this already, but the vegetable, the leek, it sounds like it's broken. Like there's nothing in your life that is like, hey, that's got a leak in it is a good thing. Like there's nothing like, hey, that's leaking. No one's like, oh, good, I'm glad, right? Like unless it's some sort of wound that needs to be drained of some kind of thing. Hope no one's eating, but you know what I'm saying? Like leek is not the best name for, like, I don't know. Anyway, so
I have an incredible track record for converting people to leeks and Brussels sprouts. This stone will not be unturned, Brian.
I already am a big fan of Brussels sprouts. I like them.
Oh,
I do like them.
We're most of the way there then.
Hey, we're halfway there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about avocado, why it's kind of the exception. Let's say 100 grams. Let's say that because that seems to be a standard thing, a standard measurement. 100 grams of avocado is going to have about 15 or 16 grams of fat. It's going to have about 9 grams of carbohydrates. So based upon the calculations that we made earlier when we were talking about the fact that fat is 9 calories per gram and carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram, that means there are 135-ish calories of fat in an avocado, and there's about 40 calories of carbohydrates. So it's almost 3 times as much fat as it is carbohydrate. So the avocado is a different story. So it's one of those vegetables that is a different story. Now, even olives, which are relatively high in fat, they're still higher in carbohydrates than oil, than the fat. You got to squish a lot of olives to get the olive oils. Is all I'm saying. Okay, so vegetables are going to equal carbs, right?
However,
okay,
we should distinguish that a lot of, especially down the exciting lettuce end of the scale, because vegetables are on a continuum, that the exciting green, leafy, leeky, Brussels sprouty, cabbagey, lettuce, radicchio, butter lettuce end of the scale, the majority of that carbohydrate is insoluble, indigestible, passes straight through you, fiber that you actually get no carbohydrate to use from.
Right. So, okay. So that's a great point. We need to differentiate. People are very, very confused by the different kinds of carbs. There's essentially 2 kinds of carbohydrates. You've got, you have essentially sugar and you have fiber, and they all basically fall into one of those 2 categories. Someone will talk about complex carbohydrates versus simple carbohydrates. Essentially, they're the same thing. A complex carbohydrate is multiple sugars strung together. A simple carbohydrate is 1 sugar string, right? That's really all it is to it. That's how you think about it. But fiber is something completely different because your body doesn't actually digest the fiber. There's different kinds of fiber. There's soluble and insoluble fiber. They have different biological reactions. But the basic point is you don't necessarily count, some people don't count fiber as part of their macro numbers because your body doesn't actually absorb it it doesn't actually absorb any of the caloric requirements coming from it. Does that make sense?
Right. You don't get energy from the fiber in your spinach. You don't get any energy from it. So, you don't. So my point is, and on face value, this might be blasphemy, but carbs per se are not bad.
Blasphemy.
Because fiber is good.
Right. So I want to make sure
and fiber is a carb. So
right.
Just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay. First of all, if you can't see the baby in the bathwater, that baby was really, really dirty. Second of all, the other thing is, yeah, my tagline is carbs are for suckers. And that's absolutely true. But the fact of the matter is, if you change how you're eating, you change how you view food, that isn't a problem for you because, eating whole foods is a healthy way of eating. So if you're eating whole foods, you're eating vegetables, those are good sources of carbohydrates, right? And nobody's going to say that broccoli, unless you're allergic to broccoli, nobody's going to say that broccoli is a problem food, right?
Nobody ever became a beast eating broccoli.
Right. Exactly. So that's precisely the point. So yes, I firmly believe that carbs are for suckers. I don't like vegetables, but I'm not telling you not to eat vegetables, right?
Right. So the carbs are for suckers. When you say carbs are for suckers, what you really, really mean is the processed sugar, flour, grain, industrialized, processed crap is for suckers.
Right. And the thing is, if it's a double meaning. You don't have a broccoli flavored sucker, right? Or a lollipop, right? That would be disgusting. Let's be honest, right? So suckers.
Is that a challenge?
No, it is not, because I don't want to have to try it. But my point is, suckers as a confection are made with sugar. So carbs, being sugars, are for suckers, right? So that's the idea. Now, that's not to say that you can, that all carbs are equal. They're not. There are different kinds. The sources are different. Let me put it that way. When they get broken down, they're all the same. But my point is, when you start choosing healthy whole foods, that's a completely different diet, right? So,
yes,
I've never once told anyone, do not eat good vegetables ever. In fact, the food list that you can get off of Ketovangelist has a whole bunch of vegetables that are totally in line with the ketogenic diet. So it's not.
Eat your greens, lovely people. Eat your greens. Saute them in butter and then eat them. Yum, yum, yum.
One of the things that Finney and Volek talk about in both of their books is to make sure you get enough potassium. You can take the drippings off of the meats that you make. And if you saute your vegetables in those, as well as, add some butter to that as well, but make sure you take some of those meat drippings. That's going to get all of the potassium that you need. That's going to be a perfectly good source for that. So
if anyone is interested in mirroring my you can only eat duck for 3 months thing, I got to tell you, when I started eating vegetables again after the whole 3 months elimination, I had like vats full of rendered duck fat from all the ducks that I had roasted. And I got to tell you, there is nothing like green vegetables sauteed in duck fat. Just freaking awesome.
I have a question for you. Do ducks fly like around your house? Like if they're flying like towards your house, do they like break up so they don't go near your house because they're afraid? Like they know that you are like the duck slayer, you are duck bane or whatever. Like they know that you've got a whole pot full of their renderings.
No, they're clueless.
Okay.
Ducks. I don't think ducks are the smartest fowl on earth.
Clearly, they're not the smartest fowl on earth. I
get them pre-debrained from PCC because that's the cheapest place in Seattle to get whole ducks.
Okay. So those are carbs, right? And again, eating stuff that's high in carbs doesn't necessarily mean it's necessarily high in sugar, because it can contain high levels of fiber. Like, for example, the avocados that we're talking about. Avocados, even though they have, say, 9 grams of carbohydrates, only 2 to 3 of those grams are actually digestible. The rest of it's just dietary fiber, right? So That's one of the reasons that avocados are great foods, because they're not only because they're high in monounsaturated fats, but they're also very, very low in carbohydrates. People will look at the number of carbs and freak out, but a lot of that is fiber. Now you can't just ingest a whole bunch of fiber without consequences. It does have biological reactions inside your body, but my point is it doesn't get digested, right? It doesn't cause an insulin response in the same way that sugar does. So it's a different.
And you don't
sort of,
use any of that for energy.
Right.
It doesn't get converted into energy that you can use.
Right. Okay, so that's carbs, right? Carbs are essentially, for keto folks, carbs are vegetables. Now, that leaves two other things, proteins and fats. So let's talk about proteins. What are proteins then?
Amino acids joined up together.
Right. So proteins are just strings of amino acids. Now, if you want to, there are two kinds of protein, or two kinds of amino acids. There's essential and there's non-essential. These are categorized by folks who categorize things because of how your body can produce these things. Essential amino acids are things that your body cannot produce on their own. Non-essential amino acids are things that your body can produce on its own. So you have to ingest essential amino acids. You do not have to ingest non-essential amino acids. Now, having said that, a good source of protein is going to have a combination of all of those amino acids. It's going to have a complete protein. When someone talks about a complete protein, what they're talking about is having all of those amino acids in one food source. Now, you can try to combine different kinds of foods to get a complete source of protein, and that's fine. But seriously, beef is right there. You don't have to worry about it. You know, if you get some steak or you get some ground beef, complete source of protein, there you go. Especially if you get the fatty kind, now you're talking a really nice keto meal. Eggs, another way. Nice, complete protein. So
pretty much animal protein derived from animals you're going to be fine.
Right. What I do not recommend, now there are some people with different kinds of problems, different kinds of metabolic issues, and or voluntary or not, right? And this doesn't necessarily apply to them. But what I do not recommend is protein drinks of some kind. I do not recommend protein powders. I do not recommend protein shakes. None of that. If you can do something better than nature can do, good for you. You're the only one, right? If you can find a better source of protein than just plain meat, you know, duck, chicken, beef, pork, lamb, whatever, then good for you. You're the only one. If it's concocted in a lab, chances are it's not going to be as good for you as what is natural and whole, right? So now there are people who are, say, vegetarians or they're vegans, and this is their particular choice of lifestyle, and they want to figure out a different protein source. Okay, that's a different scenario. Fine. You know, you've got to make do with what you've got. I understand that. Again, there are different combinations of different kind of foods that you can eat to get a completer source of protein, but it's not going to be to the degree that you might need sometimes. So sometimes you have to supplement with that sort of thing. But for the majority of people, for the vast majority of people, there is no reason to have any kind of protein powder, any kind of protein shake anywhere in your kitchen. Am I right or am I wrong? Clearly, I'm right. Clearly, by your stuttering, I'm right.
You're right. I agree with you.
Okay, moving on.
However, this is real life, right?
Exactly.
And
exactly.
You have to look at all the factors, and price is a factor, and convenience and speed, and there's lots of other things in there. And if you're just starting out, or you have a job that just makes everything more difficult, I would much rather you have a smoothie for breakfast on the go than do something that's not keto, or
right.
do something that's got some carb in it or whatever. Having said that, you know, stick with egg white powder, which is just egg whites, or find a whey protein or a casein protein or a pea protein or whatever kind of protein it is that has that is just pure protein.
No sugar.
You know, so they have their uses. if you find yourself in a situation where for cost or time or, whatever, maybe you're in a situation where you don't have an oven, so cooking meat is just difficult or problematic, but you do have a blender, do that.
I think that a steak will work in a blender. I'm pretty sure you can make a steak smoothie. I'm going to prove this.
Is that a challenge?
Well, I don't. Okay, I would not say bone in. I would say at least take the bone out, because I think that would be not as good. But I'm just saying it's possible. I think it's possible.
You get my point. So I agree with you that whole
of course.
food that used to be running around a field or growing in a field or whatever
had a face.
Is preferable.
If it had a face at one point in time.
That it breathed.
Right.
But there are circumstances where having a very, very, very high quality additive-free whey protein shake or egg white powder shake is infinitely preferable to the other options available to you.
Yes, if that's your best choice, and I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll continue to say this until I will just continue to say it, is you have got to make it work for your life. And if the best option you've got is a 70% solution, then do that, right? If it keeps you from eating crap, and if it's on par with what's keeping you as keto as possible, then do it, right? That's fine.
If a smoothie in the morning is your way to get you from a SAD diet to a keto diet, if that's the bridge, if that's what makes it work for you, do it.
Right. So, and that's the bottom line. If it doesn't fit into your lifestyle, there's no point. Okay. So meats, animal stuff, eggs, and some dairy are considered protein sources. Some dairy are considered fat sources based upon who's categorizing it. But if we're using our categorization that we were talking about before, based upon which of the majority of the calories are coming from, that means that almost all dairy stuff is going to be a fat, not a protein, right?
Cottage cheese is a good example of a protein. Cottage cheese is full-fat cottage cheese is incredibly high in protein, and actually doesn't have a lot of fat.
Right.
So cottage cheese would be a very good source of protein. If you need more, and because there are people who just, really don't like meat or whatever, cottage cheese is a great protein source.
Right. So there are, like I said, there are things that kind of cross the line. That may be a little hard to categorize. This is why labels are important, and knowing what to look at are important. Okay, so those are what carbs are. Those are what proteins are. Now let's talk about fats and good sources for fats, because this is really the crux of it. Sometimes people become keto and they think all I have to do is eat high fat, and that's half true, because you don't want to eat high. You want to eat high fat that is the right kind of fat, that is the good kind of fat. You want to avoid the bad fats. So the bad fats are going to be basically almost all vegetable fats. The good fats are going to be saturated and monounsaturated fats. So vegetable oils, seed oils, they typically tend to be what's known as polyunsaturated fats. Now, here's where the terms come from. Saturated means, so you've got this string of carbon atoms, right? Now, a carbon atom, if you guys remember from your high school chemistry classes, carbon atoms have what's called 4 valence electrons. And a valence electron is the electron that's in the outer shell. That's a very unstable kind of a molecule, which means it will bond to different chemicals, different elements in their immediate vicinity. So a carbohydrate is going to be able to hold 4 hydrogen atoms. So a saturated fat is going to have a string of carbon atoms, and every single one of those carbon atoms are filled up with hydrogen atoms where they can be. Right. So each one has a double bond. A monounsaturated fat is going to be a whole string of carbon atoms, all of them attached to hydrocarbons or to hydrogen atoms except for one. There'll be one missing one. So it's a monounsaturated. It's not saturated all the way because one of those carbon atoms doesn't have a hydrogen atom, a double bond hydrogen atom on it. So a polyunsaturated fat is going to have multiple of those carbon atoms without the hydrogens hanging off of them. So there's your science lesson for the day, right? So those polyunsaturated ones are kind of unstable fats. Now, if you've ever wondered what a hydrogenated fat is, what Crisco is, those kinds of things, what they do is they take these polyunsaturated fats and they throw a bunch of hydrogen at them chemically, and they turn them into a solid, like a saturated fat, because a saturated fat is going to be solid at room temperature. So they hydrogenate these things by slinging hydrogen at them and hoping they stick to these carbon strings, and that's how they get
I think the word you want is pump, but sling will work.
Okay, so yeah, they slam them with them. They pump them full of hydrogen, and that's how they get them there. So the good fats are the saturated and the monounsaturated fats. The bad fats are the polyunsaturated fats. So vegetable oils and seed oils, with a couple of exceptions, are the bad fats. Now, olive oil is a vegetable oil, but it is a good fat because it's primarily monounsaturated. Avocado oil is a vegetable oil, but it is a good one because it's monounsaturated. Macadamia nut oil. Are we calling nuts a vegetable? Or
No.
Seed. We'll call them a seed. It's a nut or a seed. That's a good fat because it's primarily monounsaturated, right? So those kinds of things are the exceptions, but everything else, if it's canola, if it's grapeseed, if it's soy, especially, what are some of the other vegetable oils that corn oil, especially, is horrible. All of those things are bad oils. What am I missing?
I don't know, because
I think I put Carrie to sleep just now.
For so long, and I haven't got anything in my house which has one in.
Yeah. I don't even know. I can't even recognize them. Like when when I walk down grocery aisles, I don't even notice them anymore. So yeah, it may be better to say this. Here's the good oils that you should be eating: butter, coconut oil, red palm oil is good, macadamia, avocado. Did I say butter already? Because butter's good.
Mm-hmm.
And ghee, rendered duck fat, lard, beef fat. Those are good sources of fat. Those are the good ones because they're saturated, they're monounsaturated, they're very, very healthy, they're good for you. Your brain loves that stuff, right? So that's what you should be that's what most of your stuff should consist of, right?
One thing that I've noticed, this is a public service announcement.
Here we go.
There's been some reports lately about how a lot of olive oil in the stores is actually like 10% olive oil and 90% canola oil or some other thing. And there's also been a surge because the food manufacturers are getting a little bit savvy, and there's been a surge in kind of dressings that say olive oil on the front or olive oil mayonnaise or whatever. If you actually, and this is why you have to read the label, if you turn it over and read the label, you'll see canola oil or safflower oil or sunflower oil or blah, 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 blah. And then right at the end, you'll see olive oil. So don't be misled by, if it says olive oil on the front, you make sure you read the label on the back, because the chances are that the vast majority of the fat in there is a processed industrialized vegetable or seed oil with a tiny bit of olive oil, and you do not want to eat that. No,
you do not. All right. So again, this comes back to being responsible, reading the labels. Don't just take the marketing word for it. Right. So the good oils are the ones I listed, right? Saturated coconut oil might be the best. In my opinion, it's a toss up between butter and coconut oil. They're very close. I just really like coconut oil. I eat it on just about everything nowadays. I'll even take just a spoonful of it and, down
and
it.
I would advocate for use a variety. I use coconut oil, I use butter, I use avocado oil, I use olive oil for different things, but I use a variety. So, because they're each slightly different. They've each got slightly different, vitamins and minerals and whatnot in them. So I would advocate for use a variety of the good oils.
You said
rather
vitamins.
Than just focusing on one.
You said
did I say
you
vitamins?
Said vitamins.
Isn't that cute?
I recommend you use a variety of vitamins in your oils. That's a direct quote from Carrie Brown. Jolly good. Pish posh.
I'm not from that part of England, lovey. I'm from Kent. I'm a Kentish maid.
I'm Kentish. All right. I'm not from that part of England either, just so you know. So we have that in common.
Really? Wow.
Shocking.
Anyway, use a variety.
Variety,
Switch
yes.
switch up your oils, but make sure they're all of the good, healthy kind.
Can I give you a suggestion? Not you. I'm not talking to you, Carrie. I'm not giving you suggestions. You don't like my suggestions. That's pretty clear. So let me talk to the listeners instead. So Carrie can go do whatever she wants to do for a minute. Here's what you can do, listeners who are not Carrie. There's nothing wrong with, say, combining. If you have time, you can melt down some butter, melt down some coconut oil, combine it, and then let it cool down. And now you've got a variety that's in one thing, like one pot or one container that you can just scoop out. There's a variety. You can do the same thing with butter and olive oil, right? And you get this combination. Then you don't have to worry about whether or not you've got this, that, or the other in your fridge or in your pantry. You can make your own combination oils that is available to you. Now, one of the things that's in line with this is keep your bacon grease, or keep your pork drippings, or keep your meat drippings in a container as well. Those things are perfectly good to cook with later on. Like Carrie was talking about with the rendered duck fat, she had jars and jars of it. Like Daffy and Donald would not come to her house at all because they were afraid of what she would do to them because of all the duck fat, right?
I have to say, Mr. Williamson, since I can't call you Salami Brian.
Right.
That was an excellent suggestion. But for reasons that you didn't cover why it's an excellent suggestion, is that butter probably tastes the better most of all of them, but it has a relatively low flash point, i.e. setting the house on fire point or burn point. And so if you mix, to get the best of both worlds, if when you're sauteing your leeks, if you put half butter and half avocado or coconut or some other oil which have a much higher flash point, then you're going to get the flavor of the butter, but you're going to get the heat stability and the high flash point of the other oil. So you can actually saute your leeks in for better without the risk of the butter burning because the other oil is in there. So excellent idea, sir. Thank you.
Well, I think on that note, we need to end this episode quick because I don't want to ruin. I'm on a one string like victory thing. I don't want to screw it up. Okay, so that's in a nutshell how you identify what's what. What are the macros, right? You've got carbs, which are vegetables. You've got proteins, which are stuff that walked around and breathed and had faces. And then you've got the fats, which we covered, which are the good ones and the bad ones. So avoid all the stuff that's the bad ones.
We forgot cocoa.
Okay. As in a fat.
Cocoa is a fantastic fat.
Okay.
Absolutely fantastic fat. Eat cocoa. Yum, yum, yum.
Spoonfuls of cocoa make the medicine go down.
Cocoa.
Okay.
Spoonfuls of cocoa may not, but your super dark chocolate or things made with sugar-free chocolate, goodness.
Right. So, okay, that's a good point. So I'm going to pull the hardcore card on people just a little bit. Now, it's perfectly okay keto-wise to eat 70% chocolate or darker, right? For the record, here's the thing. I'm just going to say this straight up. I am a chocolate snob. I do not like milk chocolate. I have never liked milk chocolate. I've always preferred dark chocolate. In fact, if you were to offer me at some point in time dark chocolate, peanut butter, something or other, I would probably love you forever. Like that is my favorite food combination is dark chocolate and peanut butter. Now
Wow, is that all I had to do? Seriously?
Well, I'm just saying. I'm a simple guy, right? But I don't eat peanut butter anymore because it's not in line with my particular. I wrote an article about peanuts and the whole bit. So if you want to read it, go to the Ketovangelist site. But my point is that I prefer dark chocolate, period, hands down. Now, however, that means 70% or darker. Now, a lot of people have trouble with that. And I won't eat chocolate, even if it is 70, 85%, 90%, if it has sugar in it. But there are lots and lots of manufacturers that are starting to show up on the shelves that are 70% or higher that are sweetened with stevia, they're sweetened with erythritol, they're sweetened with non-maltol, non-sugar stuff. Those things are great sources of fiber and they're great sources of fat. Cocoa is a really good fat, like Carrie's talking about.
Yep. But you do want to be careful of maltol. Of all the oils,
do not. No.
Don't eat a lot of that. Is kind of, you need to self-limit with maltol sweetened
Oh,
chocolate.
I don't think you have to self-limit. You'll know because there is a situation, if you're not familiar with it, it is known as disaster pants. Is what happens when you have too much maltol. It is not pleasant for you or for anyone else around you. So the recommendation is please limit the amount of maltol you take. And I limit it to absolutely 0. I won't eat anything that's got any maltol in it.
Me either.
So there's other alternatives. Now, for some reason, people manufacturers decided that maltol was the thing they wanted to use. So a lot of them have it. Check the label. If it's got maltol, you're best off just avoiding it, right?
I'll tell you why. It's because they're lazy. It's because xylitol and erythritol and a lot of the other oils are so difficult to work with because they'll crystallize. I mean, you can kind of look at them and they'll crystallize, whereas maltol doesn't do that.
I have, in fact, looked at erythritol. I've, in fact, looked at erythritol from across the room. Boom, it crystallized just like that. I didn't even have to do anything. It's
Yep.
Okay.
So that's why. They're just lazy.
All right. So lazy manufacturers, we don't want to support them anyway.
Nope.
All right. So there you go. That's a list of good fats too. All right. So what are the final shots? What are the parting shots that you've got, Carrie? Anything we missed or anything you want to finish off with?
You're all awesome.
That is true. I just want everyone to know she's talking to me, but she's seeing more than one of me right now. So that's what she was referring to. And I would like to translate that to say that all my listeners, you're awesome too. Okay. All the people listening.
Mrs. Williamson is particularly awesome.
Yeah. She gets that a lot. Okay. Carrie, look forward to talking to you next week. It's been fun as always.
See ya.
All right.